Admiral stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, her silver eyes reflecting the endless stream of starships that docked at the galaxy's most prestigious spaceport. Ships from 1,000 worlds came here seeking her approval, her endorsement, her legendary expertise. For 30 years, she had been the galaxy's foremost starship evaluator, the one being whose word could make or break a vessel's reputation across the known universe. Her reputation was built on an uncompromising standard that had earned her both respect and fear. The certification was the golden seal every shipwright dreamed of obtaining. Yet in all her years of service, Admiral had rejected every single vessel that came before her. Not one ship had ever met her exacting standards. The latest rejection sat fresh in her memory. Just hours ago, she had turned away the pride of the Empire, a magnificent dreadnought called the Stellar Dominion. Its fusion drives could propel it faster than most species could comprehend, its weapons could crack moons, and its shields could withstand the heart of a star. The delegation had been so confident, so certain that their masterpiece would finally earn the coveted certification. Had walked the ship's corridors, her trained eye cataloging every detail. The craftsmanship was indeed exceptional, the engineering brilliant, but like all the others, it lacked something she couldn't quite articulate, something essential that separated a mere machine from a true starship worthy of her name. Another disappointment, she murmured to herself, watching the vessel depart in shame, its delegation no doubt returning to explain their failure to an emperor who did not accept failure kindly. Her aide, a young named Quill, approached hesitantly. His forearms trembled slightly as he carried the next appointment file. Everyone on the station knew better than to disturb the Admiral when she was in one of her contemplative moods, but duty demanded he inform her of the day's remaining business. "Admiral," Quill began, his voice barely above a whisper, "there is one more evaluation scheduled for today." Didn't turn from the viewport. "What species?" "Human, ma'am." This time she did turn, one eyebrow raised in curiosity. "Human? I'm not familiar with that designation." Quill consulted his tablet, his secondary arms working the interface while his primary ones held the device steady. "They're from a small system on the outer rim, recently achieved faster-than-light travel. This is apparently their first major vessel to leave their home system." "Primitives," concluded with a dismissive wave. "Cancel the appointment. I don't waste my time on barely spacefaring species showing off their crude chemical rockets." "Actually, ma'am," Quill interrupted, then immediately regretted his boldness as her gaze fixed on him like a targeting laser. "The preliminary scans show it's not using chemical propulsion. The energy signatures are unusual." Despite herself, felt a flicker of interest. In her 3 decades of evaluation, unusual was rare. Most species followed predictable technological paths, their ships' variations on familiar themes. She had seen fusion drives, antimatter engines, zero-point extractors, and exotic matter manipulators. What could a primitive species possibly have developed that would register as unusual? "Very well," she decided. "I'll see this human vessel, but make it quick. If it's as disappointing as the others, I want them gone within the hour." An hour later, stood in docking bay 12, waiting for the human ship to complete its approach. The bay's massive doors had opened to reveal the starfield beyond, and she could see a small craft approaching. Her first glimpse of it made her frown in confusion. The ship was tiny by galactic standards, perhaps 200 meters in length, when most vessels seeking her evaluation were measured in kilometers. Its hull was a patchwork of different materials and colors, giving it an almost ramshackle appearance. Instead of the sleek, polished surfaces she was accustomed to, this ship looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. "This is what they brought me," she muttered, shaking her head. "I've seen cargo haulers with more impressive presentations." But as the ship drew closer, something made her pause. The way it moved through space was different. Most ships flew with the mechanical precision of their computer-guided systems, following perfectly calculated trajectories. This human vessel moved with an almost organic fluidity, making tiny course corrections that seemed unnecessary, yet somehow purposeful. The ship touched down with surprising gentleness for something that looked so crude. could barely feel the vibration through the deck plating. Whatever was piloting that vessel had remarkable skill. A ramp lowered from the ship's belly, and 3 figures emerged. Humans, she realized, studying them with professional interest. They were bipedal, similar in basic body plan to dozens of other species, but something about their bearing caught her attention. They moved with easy confidence, their eyes bright with curiosity as they took in the massive docking bay. The human in the lead was a woman with short brown hair and wearing what appeared to be a simple blue uniform. She approached with a warm smile that seemed genuine rather than the nervous attempts at flattery she usually received. "Admiral," the human said, extending her hand in an unfamiliar gesture. "I'm Captain Sarah of the Earth ship, Endurance. Thank you for agreeing to evaluate our vessel." Studied the extended hand for a moment before realizing it was some form of greeting. She briefly clasped the human's hand, noting the firm grip and the surprising warmth of the contact. Most species she dealt with maintained formal distance, but this human seemed to radiate a casual friendliness. "Captain," acknowledged, "I must admit, your ship is not what I expected from the preliminary reports." Captain laughed, a sound that was surprisingly pleasant. "I imagine not. The Endurance isn't much to look at from the outside. We built her from whatever we could find or trade for. But she's got heart, Admiral. That's what matters." Hart had never heard a starship described in such terms. Ships had engines, weapons, shields, and systems. They didn't have hearts, yet something about the way Captain said it made her reconsider her quick dismissal. "Very well, Captain. Let's begin the evaluation. I warn you, my standards are extremely high. No vessel has ever met my certification requirements." "So I've heard," Captain replied, her smile never wavering. "But the Endurance isn't like other ships. Would you like to come aboard?" As they approached the ship, noted the details she had missed from a distance. The patchwork hull wasn't random after all. Each section told a story. Here, a piece of composite patched a meteor strike. There, crystal arrays had been cleverly integrated into the sensor grid. The humans had taken components from dozens of different technologies and somehow made them work together. "You've incorporated a lot of alien technology," she observed. "We're new to the galactic community," Captain explained. "We didn't have the luxury of developing everything ourselves over like the older civilizations. So we learned, we adapted, we improvised. Every piece of this ship came from somewhere different, but we made it all work together." The ship's interior was even more surprising than its exterior. Instead of the sterile, efficient layouts she was accustomed to, the Endurance felt lived in. The corridors were lined with personal touches, small decorations, photographs of what she assumed were the crew's families and home worlds. The lighting was warmer than the harsh, efficient illumination of military vessels. "This is highly irregular," commented, examining a small flowering plant that had somehow been incorporated into the life support system. "Starships are precision instruments. They're not meant to be comfortable." "Why not?" Captain asked simply. "This ship is our home. Some of my crew have been aboard for 3 years now. Why shouldn't it feel like home?" They passed crew members in the corridors and was struck by how they interacted with their captain. There was respect, certainly, but also an easy camaraderie she had never witnessed on other vessels. A young man working on a power conduit looked up and grinned at Captain. "Cap'n, how's the inspection going? Think the Admiral will like our surprise?" "We'll see, Tommy," Captain replied with obvious fondness. "Just make sure that coupling holds. I don't want any embarrassing power failures during the demonstration." Surprise, demonstration. Curiosity was definitely piqued now. They reached the ship's heart, the engine room, and stopped in her tracks. The space was dominated by a massive cylindrical chamber that hummed with barely contained energy. But it wasn't the engine itself that caught her attention. It was the way the engineering crew moved around it, like they were tending to a living thing rather than maintaining a machine. "What type of drive system is this?" she asked, her professional training taking over as she began analyzing the energy readings. "That's the surprise," Captain said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Chief Engineer, would you like to explain?" A A stocky man with grease-stained coveralls looked up from a control panel. "Admiral, what you're looking at is something we call a quantum harmony drive. It's based on principles we discovered by accident during our early experiments with faster-than-light travel." Approached the drive chamber, her instruments detecting energy patterns unlike anything in her extensive database. "Quantum harmony? I'm not familiar with the theoretical basis." "That's because there isn't one," said with obvious pride. "At least, not in any textbook. We discovered that if you tune quantum field fluctuations to match the natural resonance of spacetime itself, you can achieve propulsion that's more efficient than anything we've encountered." "Impossible," stated flatly. "Spacetime doesn't have a natural resonance. The theoretical physics doesn't support such a concept." Captain and her chief engineer exchanged knowing looks. "Admiral," said gently, "would you like to see what our impossible drive can do?" 20 minutes later, found herself strapped into a crash seat on the Endurance's bridge, her entire worldview about to be shattered. The bridge was as unconventional as the rest of the ship, with stations arranged in a semicircle around Captain's command chair. Large displayed the space around Nexus Station, and she could see dozens of other vessels maintaining their required distances. "All stations report ready," called out the human at the navigation station, a young woman with brilliant red hair. "Thank you, Navigator," Captain replied. She turned to with that same warm smile. "Admiral, we're going to demonstrate why we call it a harmony drive. Chief, bring us to minimum resonance." The humming from the engine room shifted, becoming deeper, more melodious. Instruments registered the change in quantum field dynamics, but the readings made no sense according to everything she knew about physics. "Resonance established," his voice came through the comm system. "We're locked onto the local spacetime matrix." "What exactly are you planning to do?" asked, though part of her already suspected the answer would defy her understanding. "We're going to dance," Captain said simply. "Helm, execute pattern Alpha 7. The Endurance began to move, and immediately understood why the human had used the word dance. The ship didn't accelerate in the conventional sense. Instead, it seemed to slide through space as if the very fabric of reality was welcoming it, guiding it along invisible currents that no other ship could perceive. They wove between the massive bulk freighters and sleek diplomatic vessels with impossible grace. Ships that massed 100 times more than the Endurance seemed clumsy and awkward by comparison. The little human vessel moved like a leaf on a gentle breeze, requiring no apparent effort to achieve maneuvers that should have been impossible. "This is impossible," breathed, watching her instruments struggle to track their movement. "You're not using conventional thrust. You're not even disturbing the local gravitational field." "That's the beauty of harmony," Captain explained. "Instead of fighting against spacetime, we learn to work with it. Every region of space has its own natural rhythm, its own song, if you will. Our drive simply finds that song and harmonizes with it." A proximity alarm chimed, and looked up to see they were approaching a massive vegan battlecruiser. The enormous vessel was conducting routine maneuvers, its 1,000-meter bulk moving with ponderous dignity. Surely Captain would alter course to maintain safe distance. Instead, the Endurance accelerated directly toward the battlecruiser. "Captain," snapped, "that's a restricted military vessel. You cannot approach within 5 kilometers without." Her words were cut off as the Endurance performed a maneuver that violated every principle of space navigation she had ever learned. The ship rolled inverted and somehow slipped underneath the battlecruiser's massive hull, so close that could see individual sensor nodes through the... They were well within the larger ship's defensive perimeter, yet the battlecruiser's weapons remained silent. "Why aren't they firing?" asked, incredulous. Captain's smile widened. "Because they can't track us. To their sensors, we're not really here. We're riding the quantum wake of their own engines, existing in the spaces between their detection grid. It's like we're a fish swimming in the current of a larger fish." The Endurance emerged from beneath the battlecruiser and continued its impossible dance through the traffic lanes of Nexus Station. They passed within meters of ships, whose captains would normally demand explanations and threaten hostile action, yet none seemed able to properly detect their presence. "This changes everything," whispered, her scientific mind reeling with the implications. "If ships can move like this, undetected, existing in harmony with space-time itself." "It's not just about the technology," Captain said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "It's about the philosophy behind it. Every species we've encountered so far approaches space travel as a conquest. You build bigger engines to overpower distance, stronger shields to resist the hostile environment, more powerful weapons to impose your will." The Endurance completed its demonstration and began returning to its docking bay, still moving with that fluid grace that made its head spin. "Humans approach it differently," Captain continued. "We learn to listen first, to understand, to work with the universe instead of against it. That's what makes the harmony drive possible." As they settled back into the docking bay, realized she was trembling. In 30 years of evaluating starships, she had never seen anything like this. The Endurance wasn't just a vessel, it was a completely new way of thinking about space travel itself. "How?" she asked simply. "How did your species discover this when civilizations with thousands of years of experience never have?" Captain unbuckled from her command chair and helped to her feet. "I think it's because we had to. Earth isn't located in a convenient spot like most of your core worlds. We're out on the rim, surrounded by dangerous phenomena. Quantum storms that can shred conventional ships, gravitational anomalies that trap vessels for decades. We couldn't just power through those challenges like the bigger civilizations do." They walked through the ship's corridors again, but now saw everything with new eyes. The personal touches weren't inefficiencies. They were evidence of crew members who genuinely cared about their vessel. The improvised repairs and mixed technologies weren't signs of primitive engineering. They were proof of incredible adaptability and resourcefulness. "We had to learn to feel our way through space," Captain continued. "To sense the currents and eddies that your instruments can't detect. Every member of my crew has what we call space sense, an intuitive understanding of how to move in harmony with the quantum foam." They reached the ship's recreational area, where off-duty crew members were relaxing. Watched them with new appreciation, noticing how they seemed to unconsciously move in rhythm with the ship's subtle vibrations, as if they were all part of a larger organism. "Your crew," she observed. "They're not just operating this ship, they're connected to it." "That's exactly right," Captain confirmed. "The Endurance isn't just our ship, she's our partner. We listen to what she needs, and she carries us safely through the void. It's a relationship, not just a machine we control." A young crew member approached them, a slight woman with intricate tattoos covering her arms. "Captain, we've got a message from home. Earth Command wants to know how the evaluation is going." Captain turned to with raised eyebrows. "Well, Admiral, how is the evaluation going?" For the first time in 3 decades, found herself at a loss for words. Every metric she had ever used to judge Starship seemed inadequate when applied to the Endurance. The ship was smaller, less armed, and built from scavenged parts, yet it could outmaneuver vessels 100 times its size. Its crew was informal and unconventional, yet they worked together with a precision that put military units to shame. "I need to see more," she admitted finally. "This harmony drive of yours, can it work in different environments? Most ships perform adequately in normal space, but how does it handle extreme conditions?" Captain's eyes lit up with obvious excitement. "Funny you should ask. We were planning to run some tests in the Maelstrom." Felt her blood chill. The Maelstrom was a notorious region of space near Nexus Station, where quantum storms raged continuously. It was considered a ship's graveyard, avoided by all but the most desperate or foolhardy. Vessels that entered the Maelstrom were rarely seen again. "The Maelstrom," she repeated. "Captain, that's incredibly dangerous. Even the most advanced ships avoid that region." "Exactly why it's perfect for testing," Captain replied cheerfully. "If the Harmony drive can handle the Maelstrom, it can handle anything. Care to join us for a real demonstration?" His first instinct was to refuse. Her position required her to maintain professional distance and avoid unnecessary risks. But something about the Endurance and its crew had awakened a curiosity she hadn't felt in years. For 3 decades, she had evaluated ships that represented the best of galactic civilization, yet none had impressed her. This ramshackle human vessel had accomplished in an hour what no other ship had managed in her entire career. "Very well," she heard herself saying, "but I want full sensor access during the test. If your drive principles are genuine, I need to document everything." Captain extended her hand again in that strange human greeting gesture. This time, didn't hesitate to clasp it. "Welcome to the real test, Admiral," Captain said. "Let's go show you what the Endurance can really do." As the crew prepared for departure, found herself studying the humans with growing fascination. They moved with purpose and confidence despite the dangerous mission ahead. There was no fear in their voices, no hesitation in their preparations. They trusted their ship and each other completely. For the first time in her career, Admiral began to wonder if she had been evaluating starships wrong all along. Perhaps the true measure of a vessel wasn't in its specifications or weaponry. Perhaps it was something far more intangible, something these humans called heart. The journey to the Maelstrom took 6 hours, and spent every moment of it studying the Endurance and its crew. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about Starship operations. The humans didn't just work together. They functioned as a single organism, each crew member instinctively knowing what the others needed. She watched Navigator plot their course not through mathematical calculations alone, but by somehow sensing the optimal path through the quantum currents. The young woman would pause occasionally, close her eyes, and make subtle adjustments that her instruments couldn't explain, but which consistently improved their efficiency. In the engineering section, Chief and his team maintained the harmony drive not through scheduled maintenance protocols, but by listening to subtle changes in its resonance patterns. They treated the massive engine like a musical instrument, fine-tuning its performance through instinct and experience rather than diagnostic computers. Most remarkably, Captain seemed to know everything that was happening on her ship without constantly monitoring reports. She would occasionally give orders that perfectly addressed problems before they became critical, as if she could feel the ship's needs through her connection to the crew. "How do you do it?" asked during one of these moments, after had quietly directed an engineer to adjust a power coupling that diagnostics showed was within normal parameters, but which failed 30 minutes later exactly as predicted. "Do what?" replied, genuinely puzzled by the question. "Know things before they happen. Anticipate problems that haven't occurred yet. Your crew moves like they're reading each other's minds." Captain considered this seriously, leaning back in her command chair as she watched her bridge crew work. "I suppose it comes from necessity. When you're explorers pushing into unknown regions with limited resources, you can't afford to wait for problems to become critical. You learn to feel the patterns, to sense when something is about to go wrong." "That's not an explanation," pressed. "That's mysticism." "Is it?" asked with a slight smile. "Or is it just a different way of processing information? Your instruments can tell you when a component has failed, but they can't tell you when it's about to fail. We've learned to read the subtle signs that precede failure. The tiny vibrations, the slight changes in energy output, the way crew members unconsciously adjust their behavior when they sense something is wrong." As they approached the Maelstrom, began to understand what Captain meant. The region of space ahead was a nightmare of chaotic energy patterns, with quantum storms that could tear apart the molecular bonds of conventional ships. She had studied the phenomenon extensively and knew that even the most advanced shielding systems could only provide limited protection. "Admiral," Navigator called out, "we're approaching the outer edge of the Maelstrom. Quantum storm activity is at typical levels for this region." Typical levels. As if entering one of the most dangerous regions in known space was routine for this crew. "Chief," Captain said calmly, "bring the harmony drive to full resonance. Let's listen for the storm's rhythm." The humming from the engine room changed again, becoming more complex, almost like a symphony warming up before a performance. Instruments went wild as the drive synchronized with the chaotic quantum patterns ahead. "This is impossible," she murmured, watching her readouts. "The quantum interference should be scrambling your drive harmonics. You can't possibly maintain resonance in that environment." "You're thinking about it wrong," Captain explained patiently. "The storm isn't interference. It's just another song, more complex than normal space but still following natural patterns. We're not fighting it, we're joining it." The Endurance entered the maelstrom and watched in amazement as the ship seemed to dance with the quantum storms themselves. Energy discharges that would have crippled other vessels flowed around their hull like water around a smooth stone. The chaotic patterns that appeared random to her instruments were somehow being read and interpreted by the ship's systems. "How are you navigating this?" she asked, incredulous. "The quantum interference should be blinding your sensors." "We're not using conventional sensors," Navigator replied, her hands moving across her controls with fluid grace. "We're feeling our way through the quantum foam, following the natural currents in the storm. It's like surfing, but in four-dimensional space-time." Surfing, another human analogy that somehow made perfect sense in context. They penetrated deeper into the maelstrom, passing the wrecks of vessels that had attempted to force their way through with brute power. Recognized some of them, ships she had evaluated in years past that had been among the most advanced of their time. Yet they had been destroyed by the very forces the Endurance was riding like gentle waves. "Captain," Chief's voice came through the comm, excitement evident in his tone. "You need to see this. The drive is resonating with something deeper in the storm. There's a pattern here, something artificial." Captain turned to with raised eyebrows. "Care to investigate, Admiral? This is why we really came here. Our long-range scans suggested there might be something significant hidden in the heart of the maelstrom." As they pressed deeper into the storm, realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The Endurance wasn't just surviving the maelstrom, it was thriving in it. The chaotic energies seemed to actually improve the ship's performance, allowing it to move with even greater fluidity and grace. "There," Navigator announced suddenly. "Bearing 27 Mark IV. There's definitely something artificial in there, something big." On the main, through the swirling chaos of the quantum storm, a structure began to emerge. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, but clearly artificial. Its surface was covered with patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the storm itself. "By the void," breathed. "What is that?" "We were hopping, you might know," Captain admitted. "Our database doesn't have any record of construction in this region, but the quantum resonance patterns suggest it's been here for a very long time, possibly predating most current galactic civilizations." As they approached the structure, instruments began detecting energy signatures unlike anything in her experience. The artifact was generating its own quantum field, one that seemed to stabilize and channel the chaotic energies of the maelstrom. "It's not just surviving the storm," she realized aloud. "It's controlling it. This structure is what creates the maelstrom. It's some kind of massive quantum manipulation device." "That's what we thought," Captain confirmed. "The question is, what was it designed to do, and who built it?" They established a stable position near the structure, the Endurance somehow finding a pocket of calm within the raging storm. Found herself staring at the artifact with growing awe and unease. The implications were staggering. If this structure had been creating the maelstrom then the region hadn't been a natural hazard at all, but the product of some incredibly advanced technology. "Admiral," Captain said quietly, "in all your years of evaluating starships, have you ever encountered anything that could navigate these conditions? Could any of the vessels you've seen reach this place?" Considered the question seriously. She thought of the magnificent dreadnoughts, the sleek diplomatic vessels, the massive cargo haulers that represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering. Not one of them could have survived the journey here, much less thrived in these conditions as the Endurance had. "No," she admitted finally. "No ship I've ever evaluated could have accomplished this. The quantum interference alone would have disabled their navigation systems. The energy fluctuations would have overwhelmed their shields. They were all too rigid, too dependent on brute force rather than adaptability. But the Endurance brought you here safely, Captain pointed out. A ship built from spare parts by a species that achieved faster-than-light travel less than a decade ago. What does that tell you about our approach to Starship design? It told her everything. For 30 years, had been evaluating ships based on the wrong criteria. She had looked for power, for advanced technology, for impressive specifications. She had never considered that the greatest advancement might come not from building bigger engines or stronger shields, but from learning to work in harmony with the universe itself. Your ship, she said slowly, the realization hitting her like a physical force, doesn't conquer space. It partners with it. You've achieved something that all our advanced civilizations missed. You've learned to work with the fundamental forces of the universe instead of against them. Captain nodded solemnly. That's why we're here, Admiral. Not to prove our ship is better than others, but to demonstrate a different way of thinking about space travel. Humanity's contribution to galactic civilization isn't going to be bigger weapons or faster engines. It's going to be a new philosophy of exploration based on cooperation rather than conquest. As if responding to their conversation, the ancient structure pulsed with renewed energy, its quantum field fluctuations creating patterns of incredible beauty in the surrounding storm. Watched in wonder as the Endurance automatically adjusted its position, staying perfectly synchronized with the artifact's rhythm. The ship is responding to it, she observed. Your harmony drive is actually communicating with that structure. We noticed that too, Captain confirmed. Whatever built this artifact, they understood the same principles we've discovered. They learned to work in harmony with quantum forces rather than trying to dominate them. For the first time in 3 decades, Admiral felt humbled by a starship, not by its size or power, but by its philosophy. The Endurance represented something entirely new in galactic civilization, an approach to space travel that she was only beginning to understand. As they began their journey back through the maelstrom, made a decision that would change the course of her career and possibly the future of galactic exploration. Captain, she said formally, I am prepared to render my evaluation of your vessel. The bridge fell silent as every crew member turned to listen. After 30 years of rejections, the Admiral's verdict carried enormous weight throughout the galaxy. The Earth vessel Endurance, began, her voice carrying the authority of her office, represents the most significant advancement in Starship design and philosophy that I have encountered in my career. Not only does it meet the requirements for certification, it exceeds them in ways that our current standards cannot adequately measure. She paused, looking around at the incredulous faces of the human crew. Furthermore, I am recommending that the Galactic Council establish a new category of Starship certification, specifically for vessels that demonstrate this level of harmony with fundamental quantum forces. The Endurance will be the first ship to receive this new designation. Captain smiled, but her expression was more satisfied than surprised. Thank you, Admiral, but I think you understand now that our real goal wasn't getting your certification. No, agreed, watching the structure disappear behind them as they emerged from the maelstrom into normal space. Your goal was to show us that we've been approaching space exploration wrong for. That cooperation with the universe is more powerful than trying to conquer it. As Nexus Station came into view, realized that her career as a Starship evaluator was over. How could she go back to judging vessels by their weapons and armor when she had seen what true harmony with space could accomplish? The humans had shown her that the greatest ships weren't built from the strongest materials or powered by the most advanced engines. They were crewed by beings who understood that the universe was not their enemy, but their partner in the greatest adventure of all. The Endurance docked at Nexus Station with the same fluid grace it had shown throughout their journey, and knew that word of their achievement would spread throughout the galaxy within hours. The ship that looked like it was built from spare parts had accomplished something that the greatest engineering minds had never imagined possible. As she prepared to leave the ship, Captain approached her one final time. Admiral, there's something else. Earth would like to invite you to visit We have other ships like the Endurance, and we'd like to share our knowledge with the galactic community. Considered the invitation, then smiled for the first time in years. "Captain, I would be honored to learn more about human space philosophy, but I think I should warn you, after what I've seen here, I may never be able to evaluate another starship the same way again." "Good," Captain replied with that characteristic human warmth. That was the whole point. As walked down the ramp and back onto Nexus Station, she carried with her the knowledge that the galaxy was about to change. The humans hadn't just built a better starship. They had pioneered an entirely new way of exploring the universe. And for the first time in 30 years, Admiral had found a vessel that truly deserved her approval.